The Alteration by Kingsley Amis. So this is episode 63 of this series I'm doing called The Masterpieces of Science Fiction. And this book was copyright 1976, and it's the first book I've read from Kingsley Amis. Now, from what I can tell, he mostly wrote works of literature and dabbled into some science fiction concepts a little bit. Now, what this book is an alternate history book. And I knew a little bit about it before I started reading this. And this book does have a introduction by William Gibson. And I'm always kind of hesitant to read those. But I started reading it, and Gibson even mentions in the beginning he was being very careful not to put any spoilers in this introduction. But he gave kind of a pro tip that I took him up on. And he said to go out and familiarize yourself with the Reformation and Martin Luther and his role in the Reformation. So I took his advice before I read the book. I did a little research on that. And I think it did kind of help understand a little bit more about this book. So, like I said, this is an alternate history, and there's a couple main things that played out differently. One is the Reformation didn't really happen the way it happened in our timeline. And there's some other things that went on with the British monarchy that kind of changed up the face of that a little bit. And so what we've have is a book written that takes place in 1976, the same year it was written. But the landscape is completely different. We have the church with all this power over all parts of people's lives. The face of Europe is strikingly different. Even America is different in many different ways. Electricity is almost like a dirty word. It's been banned everywhere. So there's alternate technology that's taken over to allow people to travel on trains and light their homes and things like that. So it's just very stark different reality that we're living in 1976. It looks different, it feels different, and this is the setting of this book. So the main plot of this one revolves around a main character named Hubbard, and he's 10 years old, and he sings in the church choir at one of the grand cathedrals in England. And the whole conflict about this book, it's kind of an interesting one, it's a bit funny, but he's 10 years old, and everyone thinks he just has this divine voice, and so they're afraid that puberty is going to ruin his voice, and so all the church officials want to have him castrated so that it doesn't affect his voice and he can continue to sing in the choir. So that's mostly what the plot of this book is about. You have this 10-year-old not really understanding what that means to be castrated. He's, just hitting the age of pubescence, and he goes around and asks his brother and some other people what he's going to be missing out on. You get some real interesting takes on that. And ultimately, he's going to rebel away from this a little bit and try to save his balls if he can. So that's kind of the story in this one. The main plot revolves all around this, but as he kind of goes on this adventure, there's some other things that kind of play in. Now, the whole backdrop of this alternate reality is done really well. I think it was a little hard in the beginning to understand what was going on, but what Amis was doing was just doing some really good world building in a show don't tell fashion. So he was just giving you the facts of how this reality was, and it was you kind of had to piece it together through this. It wasn't just dumped on you, and you come to realize how much power the church has, how different the landscape is, and that part was done really well. The actual plot of this book was not really, I didn't really have any idea where this book was going to go, and It was entertaining once I got into the storyline and following this poor 10-year-old kid around. It was a lot of fun, and it kept me entertained throughout the whole book. It was a very short book. It was just over 225 pages or so, and it read pretty fast too. Once I got over that kind of beginning kind of confusion of the world building and everything that was going on there, we kind of sucked right into the plot of this one, and then I kind of breezed through it. Now, there is a couple very interesting twists in this book that you probably won't see coming. The ending is very unique. Not sure I like it, but he did something unique. I'll give you that, give Amos that. And then there was a couple other really interesting things that were thrown into this book. Now, alternate history, there's not many books that are truly alternate histories like this. This isn't a time travel book or someone going back and trying to change the future. This is an event that just went differently, and we're in a different timeline of those events. And so he gives some nods to Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle. There's our main character, Hubbard, and his brother, they're reading it, and there's a couple genres that are talked about in this book. It's CW and TR. So CW is a counterfeit world type novel, and a TR is a time romance. And so he does it in a really interesting way. The way The Man in the High Castle is written took an alternate interpretation because the events of World War II didn't even really happen. So it was really unique. I loved how he threw that in there. He even threw Origin of the Species by Charles Darwin in there, and how that was slightly different. And so it was a really interesting book. I've read a couple alternate history books, and while I wouldn't say they're my favorite genres, they do make you think. They kind of make you go back and do a little research on history sometimes, and this one did that for me. So it's overall, this was an entertaining read. It was short and quick and kind of a fun book. Like I said, I'm still not sold on the ending of this one. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But if you happen to see this and you like alternate history books, then this is probably one that would be right up your alley. Very well written. You can see that Amos definitely got the literary touch on his writing, so you'll definitely love it for that too. So once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.